Hello everyone, thanks for dropping by. As you can see on the screen, that quote from the Greek poet Aeschylus has as much meaning today as it did in his time. As we've all seen the bullshit coming from the Western media about the Russian military intervention into the Donbass region of the eastern part of Ukraine, and the Western media calling it an invasion, which I said in a previous video is an emotive word, and they've taken a page out of the Joseph Goebbels book of propaganda, as in repeat a lie often enough and the public will always think it's the truth. As George Orwell said in his book 1984, the people would believe what the media says that they would believe. And one of the classic examples of Western propaganda bullshit is this. ITV News is a British news TV channel, and as you can see it said Russia bombs mosque sheltering more than 80 in besieged city, says the Ukrainian government. Now this was on Saturday 12th of March this year. Now Al Jazeera jumped on the bandwagon and it said Russia shells mosque housing 80 civilians in Mariupol. Well, the question is, this is just bullshit, as it didn't happen. The Arabs website ID says Mariupol mosque not bombed, says Ismail Haksioglu. Now he's the guy in charge of the mosque. Now if you go on Google and type mosque bombed and then look for images, they all more or less come up with this picture. Now if it had been bombed and damaged, it would have been all over the Western media like a rash, and they would try and stir up the Islamic people of the world that the big bad Russians have damaged one of their mosques. Also, Middle East Eye says the same thing. Russia-Ukraine war. Head of Mariupol Mosque Foundation denies strike. Head of Sultan Suleiman Mosque Foundation, the guy in charge of it, contradicts reports by Kiev that mosque sheltering Turkish citizens had been shelled. What really happened was a stray bomb went off 700 meters away from the mosque, and all they heard was a bang. But of course, the ITV and Al Jazeera are not interested in that. They just wanted a headline to store up bullshit so the people of the world that believe the Western line will think that the big bad Russians have shelled a mosque. And that goes for some of my workmates, because they also swallow the official line. They don't think for themselves. Now, the mosques have been damaged, but not by the Russians. The Ukrainian army has shelled a mosque in the eastern part of the country. This was done on the 5th of June 2019, and there's a picture of it. It was on the mosque from the village of the Ukrainian army opened fire on the mosque from the village of Pesky, where the artillery was located, and currently the results of these clashes, more than 10,000 people have died. Kiev accuses Russia of supporting the separatists, while Moscow denies the accusations and calls for attention to the Russians living in the area, which is the basis of this entire conflict in Ukraine. Now also the Western press would give the impression, if you follow the official line, that the whole world is against Russia. Well, they're not. As looking around, I found this. This is Press TV, the Iranian news source. It says, beyond NATO stand millions root for Russia. This was done on 8th of March. NATO killers, you have blood on your hands, you are not welcome here. Maybe rooting for Russia sounds a little bit over the top, but it is true that outside NATO countries, enclaves, the so-called Western democracies and their sycophants, i.e. Britain being one of them, in Africa, Asia, South America and Middle East, that things seem quite a bit differently. These people aren't actually rooting for Russia, which many of them actually are, but there are lots and lots of people who understand the position that NATO has put Russia in. Now, also in the West, there are some people who are more sensible than the Western media would have you think. Brother Nathaniel is one of them. This is his latest video, Putin is the New COVID. It's just under 6 minutes and explains how the Jewish-controlled Western media in America have got Putin as the bogeyman to hate because they always need to demonize the enemy. And this is a reason why the Western media is going against them. Also, besides him, there's a lady in America called Kim Iverson, who's a journalist for a channel called Hill TV. This YouTube video is quite interesting, as it says Russia is really about the demise of US homogeny and the petrodollar. And she explains in clear detail that the silly sanctions that are aimed at Russia are not going to affect Russia much, because Russia has China and India on her side, as well as the UAE, Saudi, which is sick of being lectured to by the Americans, and Israel, who is also sort of on Russia's side as the Israeli Prime Minister and head of government. He wants to be neutral and act as an arbitrator in the peace talks. Now, Brother Nathaniel also says that Russia has plenty of oil, plenty of gas, she can feed herself, plenty of minerals, and she has lots of customers for them. This lady also more or less says the same thing. As for these foreign nationals that are going to fight Russia, I found this little article. As I said, all these muppets that the Sun, the Daily Mail, the Mirror and all the other British tabloid press are saying are going to fight Vlad. Legion of the Damned inside Ukrainian's army of misfits, veterans and war tourists in the fight against Russia. Now this guy, Andrew Milburn, he's not just a journalist, if I can get down the bottom. He's a retired US Marine Corps officer, reached the rank of colonel, a 31-year career as an infantry and special operations officer, and his last position in uniform was deputy commander of special operations, Central Skosant, and prior to that he was a commanding officer of the Marine Raider Regiment and Combined Special Operations Task Force in Iraq. So, in other words, he's a professional soldier. He knows what war is like because he's been on the dirty end of it, and he's not got a very high opinion of all these war tourists that are going to Ukraine in order to fight the big bad Russians. Speaking of Zelensky, I found this little article. He's going to adopt the World Economic Forum proposals. So this little Jew is going to obey the orders of this big Jew, and he's going to impose a digital identity, vaccine passport and digital universal basic income on Ukraine, like the American Fed wants to impose a digital dollar on the American public that Brother Nathaniel goes on about in one of his videos. And we all know that Russia today has been banned from the Western media, Britain, Canada, America, but you can still watch it live. You just go in there and you type rt.com on air and you get the news, which is on now. Zelensky, NATO had rejected Ukraine membership but maintained open door. Now this is live, being streamed from Moscow. So, as you can, I'll just put the sound on.
We do not want armed conflicts or bloodshed. We want to resolve the situation by political and diplomatic means. We should at least have some clear and understandable legal guarantees. This is the purpose of our proposal, which has been written and sent to Brussels and Washington.
Time and time again, Moscow has said that including Ukraine in the NATO military alliance would violate treaties connected to the Council for Cooperation and Security.
And that's the 1 o'clock news. It's at 2 o'clock, so if you go on there, you can see it yourself, and you can bypass all these Western boycotts of being transmitted because it's streaming over the telephone system. They're not going to shut it down because they'll have to shut down the entire internet. If you click on that, it gives you satellite data, and you can, if you've got a satellite in your home, you can frequency it and choose it so it can be beamed direct to you. It's from the Chinese Sat-12 satellite, so will the warships updated? What do you do that for, you silly boy? Anyway, that's RT. You can still see it, and you can still watch the news, and that goes around the boycott. And of course, you can always go on South Front. They have reports on the current conflict. That's the current situation of the map. That's the Donbass region map, and this is the latest report, 21st of the 3rd, 2022, which, as you can see, is today. Open that. See what's going on there. Russia eliminates 80 more radicals and mercenaries in strike on Ukraine. Whoops. They always do that because it's a crowdfunding effort. And you can read all about it with news and videos, etc., etc. But anyway, as it says, truth is always the first casualty of war. But there are elements of truth in all the bullshit. You just got to look for them, and I'll naturally put all the links below. But this war, hopefully by this time next month, it'll all be over by the shouting. But Russia is not going to be damaged. It's America which is in serious trouble, because there's food lines in America, and hungry people are dangerous to a government, as every government throughout history have been brought down when the population is finding it difficult to find food. So Putin doesn't have much to worry about. It's Biden and his administration which is in serious trouble with the midterm elections coming in America, and they know that they've got to get something happening, otherwise they're going to be out of power. I think this video's gone over my 10-minute mark now, so I'll leave it at that. You know the routine, people. Like, dislike, comment, subscribe. It's completely up to you. But here's to a peaceful outcome to this war and the killing to stop, because war's no good. As Lincoln says, the only good thing about war is the end of it. Right, that's it for this one. I'll see you next week. Bye-bye.